Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to paint warp spiders in a nice, simple and effective way so you can get them on the table nice and quick. As a huge Eldar fan, I was very excited with all the new aspect warriors coming out. I've painted a lot of them already, and so I was really happy to get more to paint to add to my army. I really didn't know which ones to go for and what to start with. I'll paint everything eventually, and you'll see that in videos, no doubt. I really like fire dragons, but I already painted these about a year ago actually, these little cuties, the metal ones, and I thought, well, let's just do something different. I really like the swooping hawks as well, but I think they're going to take quite a long time, and I'd like to do a pretty nice job of those. So I thought, let's go for some warp spiders. Let's get those guys done. In this video, I'm going to show you how to paint them if you have an airbrush and also if you don't have one. If you're painting with a brush, I really recommend Grey Seer Primer, the pale grey. Having a light colour to start with is going to help you so much, and personally, I wouldn't do them from black. If you're airbrushing, then like me, you could do the body in black and the helmets in this grey I've got here. I'm going to start by spraying some Tamiya flat white over my grey. If you're using a brush, then you can hand paint some white straight over the Grey Seer, and it's going to be quite easy to highlight straight from that, as there's not too much difference between Grey Seer and some white. I'm slowly building up the white, spraying from one direction, just to leave a little bit of the grey on the side for some shading, and if you're brushing that, just highlight the upper areas facing the light. With the white still in the cup, I start spraying the bodies as a pre-highlight. So again, if you're brushing on, then I would just use the grey primer. The main aim for this is to give a nice light base coat so we can get a nice bright red. I really don't enjoy painting red from black. I can do it, but if we're going to have red as the main colour, I'll always start with a pale base coat. And the black and white is good because any parts that you want really dark, you can leave those, obviously by not spraying them with the white. I'll be using the Cult of Paint reds, but I'll put the equivalent from Citadel so you can go ahead and paint these now. These paints are close to coming out, we're just really trying to finish off the last few bits, but they have to be right. The main difference with these paints is the colour. The most important thing for me was getting rich, beautiful colours, and the difference is subtle, but I just wanted to show you, next to Mephiston Red, but you can see the Mephiston is just a little greyer and not as rich, and for me, I want the richest, most beautiful red I can, so when designing these colours, that was the priority really, making them really smooth and a really nice colour. Just to compare as well, I'll quickly show you Rhinox Hide, which was my most used paint ever, so it was really important for me to get a really nice dark brown. But again, I found this too grey, and this dark brown is really rich, really deep, which is what you want for a dark brown shadow. Anyway, we'll get more information on those as soon as we can, and I promise they aren't that far away. To be honest, no matter what red you're using, I think the important thing to get out of this video is starting with a light colour, and that's just going to help get a much more vibrant red. You can see my first pass with the airbrush, it's already looking super rich, and that's helped by the paint. They're quite a vibrant colour as you can see, but the white is just really important to get a beautiful red. I'll show you how I brush it on because I had to brush it on for the helmets, and once they were finished you couldn't tell the difference, but you can just see how quick the airbrush is, and for me, when I'm army painting, that's why I like using the airbrush. The thing I paint the most are display models, whatever you want to call them, but kind of going all in and spending ages on one figure is my main thing. At the moment, I'm just finishing off this bust from our Kickstarter, and I've been painting every tiny little dot for texture and just spending absolutely forever on it. And for this project, I didn't use the airbrush. I wanted to be meticulous and, as you can see, just paint every tiny little dot. And this is, what I want to do, but it is quite tiresome sometimes. So for me, it's really nice to, one, paint something simple in an army level way, but also just, get the airbrush, spray the red and just get on with it. So I like to paint those two different things at the same time. If you're interested in tutorials like this, this is what I'll normally do over on the Patreon. And the video series for this bust is, I think, about an hour and 50 minutes. So it's super in depth, kind of going through every step. Anyway, that's my plug. But I do think it gives context in, when I'm using the airbrush for army stuff and having that nice, change between this kind of painting and some army painting. When the red is base coated, now you've got to do the worst job, which is blocking the black. My only tip, I guess, is I used a big brush, a size 3, to block out most of it, as I've done here on the gun. Just kind of the easy bits, that you can't mess up. Then I switched to a 00 detail brush where it was close to the red and I couldn't mess it up. So this part on the gun was a really important part. And yeah, I was a little bit scared, but I knew I could fix any mistakes anyway. But I'm just trying to run my brush along the side there, get it as sharp as possible. But I think that's my only tip that I can come up with for now. It's just a bit of a slog. I think it took me about 15 minutes per model to do the black, so these weren't too bad. I also like to paint the bodysuits on my Eldar. I think, it makes them stand out a little better rather than being the same color. I did this on my striking scorpions, and it's my favorite part. It kind of makes the colors around it look even better. And I think with red, I try and paint as much black as possible on miniatures with red, and it just really helps lift and make the red look even brighter. I start working on the helmets now, and I begin by blocking in the red, and this is what I mean by you can follow this guide and do it with a brush, because it's going to look the same as the airbrushed one in the end. Like the black, I have to take my time here so I don't get on that crispy white. And yeah, it took a couple coats, but I got a really nice, beautiful red. And yeah, I found that the airbrush just made it quicker, but the final result, there wasn't really much in it. Again, the key really, I think, is just starting with a pale primer, and that just makes everything a little bit easier, apart from blocking in that black. Another great thing, a benefit of having this pale primer, is painting the eyes. I start with blue-green from AK, and I like to start with the lightest color often and then go darker. But I'm kind of going to block in the entire eye with this blue-green, and then I'll just wash that with a darker one. You can also base coat your gems at the same time. Now I'm going to wash around the recess, and I'm using Despair Green from Scale 75, which is a super dark, rich turquoise. I think you could use a contrast paint if you have that. Maybe Stegodon Scales, I think it's called. I'll put it along the bottom, the right one. But I think the point is you start with a light base coat, then paint your lightest blue one, and then wash that, and it's going to save you a bunch of time. It also makes it easy finding the recess and the details in the eyes. And you can see we've got super punchy colors already. Got a nice vibrant red, the clean white helmets, and the really vibrant blue. I just think it's a combination that always looks great. Depending on the level you want to paint these to, there's a bunch of additional steps that are really optional. Here I'm re-highlighting with blue-green, and I've put a little bit of ivory in it just to kind of make the corner pop. But this is going to be barely visible on the tabletop, which is why I think it's quite optional. And then I also do a little white dot to make it look kind of shiny in the corner. I paint my wraithbone in a really simple way. I use Xandri dust, but it takes quite a few coats to get it looking really good, probably 3. So I actually start doing this early on, and I let that dry, and I add the second, the third coat while I'm going back and forth between other details. So I thought I'd just get a first coat on now, and while that's drying, I'll probably work on some other elements. I take a darker red and I line the panels. For me, I prioritize this over edge highlighting, but we will add some highlights in the next step. Another optional step is highlighting the red. I'm going to use Vallejo Vermilion. It's a really nice one, and it's got good coverage, so it's nice for highlighting. I wouldn't focus on edge highlighting personally. I'm going to focus on highlighting the parts that are going to be facing the light around the focal areas and just kind of, building up nice volumetric highlights, which sounds fancy, but it's kind of quicker. And if anything, this is going to have more impact on the tabletop than painting all the edges. So I just focus on what I'm going to be able to see, really. So things like the top of the chest, the knee, a little bit on the shoulders, that's enough for me. I really focused on just adding highlights to these areas that matter, like the shoulders, and a lot of the shoulder is covered by the backpack, so I focused on the front of those, and the arms, the knees. You really can just put as much or as little effort into the highlighting step as you want. They're going to look absolutely fine with a nice crisp red and all the black blocked in. I think that's the important bit for the tabletop, and depending on your style, your preferences, and the amount of time you want to put into these, I think that's going to dictate how much highlighting you do. I would say defining things with a shadow, so painting in a dark line with a dark red, I would definitely do that, but the highlighting is certainly optional. I'm doing a bit of multitasking here to save time, so I'm adding coats of that Xandri dust in between, and I also begin to base coat the metallics with decayed metal from scale 75, which is one of our favourites. I don't know if this was a waste of time, this step, but later I highlighted, and maybe I could just do that. I came to the end of my painting session and I thought I'll glue some sand on, actually, as the PVA glue takes quite a while to dry, and then I'll come back to that the next day and I can finish that. So this was more because of the timing of I was coming to the end of the day, but maybe you want to leave the basing until last. But for me, I'm trying to get this done and filmed, and I don't want to sit around waiting for PVA to dry. So I came back the next day with my sand dried, and I began my painting session by just doing a quick wash of a Rhinox hide over everything. And you can't mess this up, really. If you get tide marks, it's good. It's going to look like little cracks and stains. So just a nice diluted normal brown paint and wash it over everything. And I had to do a couple coats of this, but don't worry about it pooling in areas and looking messy. It'll look fine in the end. For the gun lightning, I wanted a slight cold orange look. I used Pastel Peach from AK, but there is a Citadel equivalent. I think it's called Luganath Orange, and it's just a really pale, powerful orange, and it works really well. So I added that to the vermilion, and I started painting my lightning pattern. So just trying to do nice big angle changes. You don't want them to be curvy lines, and this is difficult, and I had them more dense towards the lower part of the barrel. This is just tricky. I'd have a bit of practice on something that maybe doesn't matter if you haven't done it before, but definitely have a go if you're a little bit worried about it. Just try it, and a few little forks of lightning will look cool. Then, depending on your skill level, you can add some white and then do the lines even finer. So if you're a little bit worried about doing the lightning, just do a more subtle kind of orange one, a little bit fatter. If you're good with your skinny fine lines, then you can push this nice and bright. I started working on the black. I've really been enjoying AK German Grey as a first highlight for black. And for these, the tabletop, I didn't really take it much further than that. Again, I prioritized doing, big volumetric highlights. Maybe this looks scary to you, but I do think this is going to have more impact on the table personally. And I just followed, a long line across the gun, across the top. And I did do a few of the edges where I thought it mattered. And again, this is where put as much time and effort into it as you feel necessary. You could add brighter highlights, go up to a lighter grey. I was pretty happy with how it was looking with just the German grey. I'm trying to go for a simple, effective and neat job, and that means if I want to add any extra to it, I can come back to these models anytime and add more. I don't like to rush any steps, but I'm just doing a few simple ones here. So I could add in a week's time some brighter grey highlights if I don't like the look of the black, or maybe I play a few games and I'm not satisfied with how they look. I can just add some extra to it any time. But what's most likely that happens is I play some games and they look great, and I kind of forget about that they don't have 2 or 3 stages of black highlighting. So, you know, again, adjust this to you. I think that's really important. I highlighted all the metallics with Rune Lord Brass, and maybe it would be faster if you just went with Rune Lord Brass straight away. I'm not sure if the Decayed Metal base coat is necessary. Actually, I think what's probably best is a mix of the two and then a highlight with this. I think that would probably be best. Either way, yeah, I really like this colour. I think it's excellent. It's not too yellowy gold. I think it's perfect for the Eldar. So remember those stains I talked about with the Rhinox hide wash? Well, you can take some Xandri dust now, and if you want, you could add some texture to the rock, highlight them, and you can see I don't think any of those stains are looking bad. It just kind of makes the rock look a little bit more natural. I don't think you need to add some highlights, but you can if you want. Last touch is adding some grass tufts. I like using the moss tufts, but I think they look more like grass than moss, to be honest. And I really like this colour because they don't stand out too much. And this is what I've gone for on the rest of my army, so I kind of have to use these to match, but I like them a lot. Okay, so let's take a look at the final result, the finished unit. I think the main takeaways I wanted you to get from this is something that's got a lot of red on it, some red and white. I think you really do have to start with a pale primer. It's just going to give you an easier time. And then the only really difficult task is blocking in that black, but it's so worth it. Having the crisp red against that black just looks really, really striking. And the other thing is just adjust the amount of detail to your personal level. You know, different people have different times that they have to paint available. I can obviously paint all the time, but don't feel forced to do anything. You know, you don't have to add loads of highlights, loads of edge highlights. It can look good, nice and simple and crisp. So yeah, just go with what feels and looks good. Let's have a little look how they are against the rest of my Aspect Warriors, and yeah, I'm really, really happy. I love that, you know, the Aspect Warriors don't have to be the same colour. That's what really appeals to me with the Eldar. It means I can do the tutorials for all of them because it's not the same colour, and that makes it way more feasible to do an army of these and do video content. I will be doing the rest of the Eldar. I'm not sure when. I'm doing the Phoenix Lord for the Warp Spiders over on Patreon, but at the moment I'm just converting it, and I wanted to repose it for no other reason than just to make it more unique. But yeah, if you're liking the look of that, here's a little sneak peek, and I'm excited to start that series over on Patreon. I hope you enjoyed this video, and these Warp Spiders were really fun to paint. They were really simple. You just have to take your time with those important steps, blocking in the red, blocking in the black, and there's not too many annoying details, things like that. So yeah, amazing new sculpt. I really, really like them. I didn't love Warp Spiders before. I just didn't have much of an attachment to them, but now they've got these amazing modern models. I think they're one of the coolest units in my army. So hopefully this year I'll get a chance to test them out in a game. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to reading your comments, and I'll see you in the next one.